what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
This is
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
a podcast
Do I get to go?
from Red Hot Publications.
Close enough.
RedPubPod.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the next edition of RedPubPod, which is the official podcast for Red Hot Publications, an initiative of Catawba Valley Community College, located in charming and sweet and beautiful Hickory, North Carolina. My name is Patty Thompson, and I am the acquisitions editor for Red Hawk Publications. And joining us today is our fearless engineer and director of the program, Richard Eller.
Yay!
And we've got two very special guests today. This is going to be a poet on poet, if you will. We've got Scott Owens, who's here representing his newest collection. I believe it's his 25th. The Song is Why We Sing. And he will be discussing and asking questions of another poet whose book we've recently published, Michael Heddich, who's published the award-winning book, Waking Up Alone. And it is the winner of the 2025 Lena M. Scholl Book Award by the North Carolina Poetry Society. So I want to welcome both of you gentlemen to our show today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I'm really fortunate to be able to have two poets. As a matter of fact, if you're familiar with our podcast, you know already that Scott is our poetry man. Cue Phoebe Snow for all those old people out there. Scott is not only the poet laureate for the city of Hickory and the owner of Tasteful Beans, who happens to be our
sponsor.
There you go. But he's also pretty much the head lead up of our Poetry Hickory in the area, and a poetry salon, which I'm hoping he'll talk a little bit more about. And if you don't mind, Scott, I'm going to let you kind of lead this one a little bit because I enjoy being between two poets.
Well, sure. I'm happy to. And I'm actually going to flip it right over to Michael immediately. I absolutely love the book. It's one of the most moving things that I've read in the last 20 years. So, and
I'm grateful. Thank you.
Well, no problem. I appreciate the opportunity to read it. I don't think that I could ever write a poem that I like as well as I like your poem, The Meadow. So I'm wondering if you don't mind just starting us off by reading that.
Good, thank you. And thanks for that, and thanks for Red Hawk, and thank you, Patty. It was a real pleasure to work on this book with Patty and with everybody else. And I'm really grateful, thank you. And it came out really well. I'm grateful for that, too. So this poem is called The Meadow. It's the first poem in the book. The Meadow. I woke in a tall grass field at first light and listened to the birds and hummed with the dream I made up from wisps that ran through my body, shivering marrow, making me notice the dew that dampened my face and the spider webs starting to shimmer the trees. Everything was breathing. The long night echoed in the dawn light, stars and vast migrations, as the breeze stuttered a moment, then stilled. Across the field, my companion was singing her own perfect song, which was silence. Still, I could hear her somehow, so I got up and set off to thank her for sharing this beautiful place she'd known all her life, this place she'd always felt happy, the place she'd yearned to stay as long as she breathed. And then she'd told me she turned into something more perfect, the vast sky, so blue it hurt the eyes, or a meadow like this one that stretched to the horizon. Thank you for asking me to read that poem. It's the first poem. I haven't read any poems from this book aloud yet at all. So reading it just now, I kind of like, when you read after you've read a poem a few times to an audience, you kind of know how it goes and what to expect. And I do know from writing it how what to expect. But I got a little surprised by some of the turns in the poem, which I liked, but also made it difficult to read as well as I normally do.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of musicality to the poem. There's an enormous amount of alliteration, a little very subtle internal rhyming going on. There's just a lot from a technical perspective going on. And with all of that, you just capture the imagery so well. It transports the reader to that place and that moment that you're describing. And I think it's fantastic.
Great. I'm glad you like it. Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. And one of the things I was just rereading your book before I came over. And one of the things I'm impressed with in your work is the formal quality in your poems. All of your poems have this formal integrity that really like is very impressive. It's beautiful. They're beautifully handled. And they're mostly 4-beat lines, semi-metrical poems. And I wonder how you, how you approach the poem, how you approach the metrics in a poem, how you make a poem. What's your process normally?
I don't know that I have anything like a regular process anymore. It just varies so much from poem to poem, and I really believe the poem ultimately is going to tell me what form or approximation of form it wants to have. So I mostly just try to listen to the poem as it develops.
But how did you tune your ear? Your ear is very well tuned.
Well, I started off like so many people with formal poetry. I got to the point as an undergraduate at Ohio University, I could whip out a Robert Frost imitation in about 15 minutes. And then I realized, well, but I'm not Robert Frost, and I'm not living in early 20th century New England, so that's it's not really the style, I guess you would say, that I should be writing in. And so I started reading more widely, and we were talking about this before we got started today. I try to resist falling into any particular style from poem to poem. I really do try to let the poem tell me what it wants to look like and feel like. So, and I would say the same thing actually about yours. Now, I do think with this particular book, the whole thing feels like one poem in a sense. I do think there's a particular voice to these poems, but it's not the same voice that you've used in much of your the rest of your work.
Right.
This has, I do think, I was calling it a observant associative narrative, which I think hits on the key things for me. And I do think that is going on as well in the piece. And I want to ask you, what you call the piece in Mudroom, that is as much essay as it is poem, I think it follows the same movement in a sense, letting the associations happen, following the associations, and being very observant of what different things bring up, and really working to bring out all the detail of each association. But then the whole thing having a sort of cohesive narrative from beginning to end.
Yeah, I love that. I love that insight, and I actually intended to say to you I think you do the same thing. I mean, it's you let each poem become itself, but you have a technical facility that undergirds everything you do. So you can trust yourself as you're moving forward to make something that has a certain wholeness, a certain, for lack of a better word, coherence, given the formal integrity of your technique, basically. You asked a question, I think implicit in the question you asked about that mudroom interview or discussion, I don't remember it, but I'm glad you brought it up, was a term I used to use when I was teaching, which was the wild mind, and actually more accurately, the feral mind. And I used to, and I still think about it as something like a way that our approach to the language itself, like the structure, the formal quality of the language, the cadences of a poem's line, starting out with, let's say, a 4-beat line, and allowing that 4-beat line to become something like the direction of the poem in one's intentional mind, let's say, so that I'm following something in the formal quality of the poem towards something I don't really know until I get there. And it's similar to to my mind, to the way, let's say, a wilder animal looks for its food. Let's say a coyote moving through the woods is not going to be moving through the woods the way a domesticated dog takes a walk with his master. The dog just walks out. We live our lives for most of our lives. I know I'm going to get up in the morning, get dressed, have coffee, do these things, and in a way that kind of leads to a certain half-asleep quality to one's life. Whereas in poems, I always intend to have it be more like I'm in the woods and I need to find that food that I can see signs of and ahead, but I don't know how to get there. I have to pay attention to the signs in order to get to that goal. I don't know where the goal is going to end up, but I'm doing something that has a certain quality of form in order to get there, and at the same time, that form distracts me from what I might call my ordinary mind. I don't know. I'm not making it make sense in a particularly clear way, but I think that's what I've worked on in poems. The way I try to find something I didn't know before I started writing the poem is to write something in a form that takes me away from my ordinary mind. And I think you do that. You do that too, and thus there's a kind of a cohesive quality to something that takes a lot of turns and goes in a lot of directions, and yet still has a formal quality that it would not have had I not given it that structure. And one of the things about that book, my new book, that I don't trust quite is it feels much looser formally than my other work does. So in a way, reading it, I feel that it's not going to come across as a formed thing as well as I want most poems to do.
And yet I would say that you are capturing an experience, a feeling, a train of thought that most of us cannot imagine ever successfully putting into words. The loss of the person you love the most is it's unimaginable to be able to put those feelings into words, and by focusing so much on the details of the moment, the details of the experience, along with all of the associations that brings up, you succeed. You capture it as I think probably the only way it could be captured.
Oh, thank you. May I ask you to read a poem now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Poem to a Cold Land. I had a lot of poems I wanted to have you read, and actually I'll probably get you to read a few others as we go, but let's start with that one.
Okay. This is actually one of the oldest in the book. Kay Beyer, former North Carolina Poet Laureate, and I had started a brief correspondence. She was the teacher and I was the student. And we had an ice storm, and we were talking about the ice storm, and she was talking about what it was like. She was living in Cullowhee, and I was down in Charlotte. And I don't know, something about the ice storm became a metaphor for childhood experiences and how they don't stay in childhood, but they can stay kind of frozen inside us until something in our current experience causes them to thaw. And so that's really the central metaphor of the poem. Poem to a Cold Land for Kay Beyer. Where you are, I imagine the ice cocoons the trees. Here it melts in a day, the music of its passing pelting the ground like a rainstorm on tape delay. The image is too rough, I know, but how else can we speak of things that happen out of time's logic? Grown-up children feeling the pain of abuse years later. Memories that were dreams for years completing themselves at a word, a touch, an image flashing before your eyes. Years ago, from a kitchen window, I saw, or thought I saw, things rising repeatedly like undersides of wings, but each time I looked too late, only glimpsed a shadow of what was passing. Tonight the fog fills the darkness with white breath, and even now I'm uncertain if what I've seen were birds or ghosts or imagination, though I've learned regret is a kind of ghost that rises when you let it, when you let your guard down, when some new passing distracts you and the past becomes a phoenix rising, burning into smoke. I started this with ice, with limbs wrapped in translucent sleeves, with trees dragging their hair on the ground, with white breath rising like a flurry of birds. But the wings they flash seem only a moment of clarity, brief image of becoming. And even where you are, winter speaks in melting, ice turning to water, spilling down leaves and limbs, whispering to the ground, swelling into rivers, singing with only fragments of words.
Nice, really nice. Beautiful reading too. I like the whole poem, but I really like the initial image, the ice cocooning the trees. That's beautiful. That's a really cool one. That's one to steal. Like you might see that in one of my future poems. Another thing I really like about this poem is, the way it reads on the page is exactly the way you read it aloud. I come across poets who you see their poem on the page, and then when they read it, it's like, wait, what was the point of it being on the page like that if you're going to read it like that?
Yeah.
So how do you want us to hear it? Another thing I really like, I like all the rhymes, the sort of secret embedded rhymes there. But I also like the fact, and I like this about all your work, that it is very accessible. Anybody could read this poem and enjoy it, but yet it's not trivial or simple-minded. It's not talking down to anybody. It's useful poetry for someone who needs something like poetry in their lives, but might not be someone who studied it particularly in college or anything. So that's a real gift, and it's something I find kind of largely absent from mainstream poetry right now. Not that poetry isn't understandable, quote unquote, but that it doesn't speak to. It doesn't speak in ordinary language to ordinary concerns, but those ordinary concerns being profound concerns, not you know what I mean? Like, just because it's ordinary doesn't mean it's not profound.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I really like about your book. But let me ask another question before we go. The other thing I really admire about this book is the title. Like it's a funny thing because titles of books are hard, I find, because their function is to draw the whole book together. But in this title, it's almost like that's the answer we want to give to so much of what we do with engagement in our lives. The song is why we sing. The life is why we live. The joy is why we, you know what I mean. And often, I think there's an implicit, maybe unstated question as to why do you write poems? You don't make any money on it. You don't get this. There's no. What is the point? Well, the song is the point, and that's why we sing. That's why we live. That's the joy of doing this fully engaged art form.
Well, and I think that you've hit on a question that every poet gets asked frequently.
Yeah.
Well, why are you doing this? Because
exactly.
you're right. We don't make any money on it, or very little money on it. We don't know if we don't know for sure how many people we reach with anything that we say, anything we write.
Right.
So, but the whole world is so tied up in these sort of teleological aims that everything has to have a purpose and a goal.
Right.
But you're right. Shouldn't the purpose simply be to be in the moment, get something out of the moment that you're in? And again, going back to your book, that's what I love about it is you do transport us to that moment where we're there, and all of the complexity. What you were saying earlier, you were wondering whether the way you were saying it was making sense, and I wrote down the phrase intentional unmindfulness, and I think that's what you achieve in your poetry that I don't see very often in a lot of other poetry, where quite often the poem does seem to have a specific purpose, a goal, something that it's trying to do. With yours, what it's trying to do is to be in the moment that you're writing about. And you can't do that if yes, you have the intention of doing that, but you can't be focused on, okay, am I there yet? Have I got it now?
Right.
You
That's
just
stepping outside.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I like your. Did I say it's an intentional? What was the?
You said intention. You
Yeah.
said you go into the woods with intention, but then you were
Yeah.
describing how once you get into the
Yeah.
woods, you have to kind of set aside
Sort of
the
like the
purpose of going into the
Right.
woods and just be there
Yeah.
and see what you find. So
Yeah, so I mean, and in a way that I think of that as a mindfulness, like
Exactly.
not a mindfulness as a way of getting out of my ordinary everyday, getting and spending and doing this and that mind. Okay, let me see here. 1 second, I got it. Oh yeah, I have a question for you. Many of the poems in this book are very interestingly, quote unquote, after other poets, but you do really interesting things with them, and I see particularly Wallace Stevens in the 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird and other echoes. They're just interesting echoes that I also think of as. What would I say? Echoes of your reading, echoes of your life in poetry. Like I hear Rangel Jarrell in one poem. Did you intend that, or was it just there?
I'm not sure which poem.
I just saw it this morning. Yeah. I mean, and that's the question, really. Sometimes we echo other writers without realizing it because we've read them. I mean, and because they meant something to us. It was one of the short poems. 1 sec. I'll find it in a second. Because I just saw it this
to
morning.
start
It was
answering-
the death of the ball-turret gunner. It was a line that just reminded, from my mother's words, they washed me out.
Yeah. That one was very intentional, and
Yeah, but that's great. I love that. I love reading people's work that it shows me what they've read. And I doubly like it when I like that person that they are pointing me back to.
Well, let me bounce that question back to you because I do have, and I don't want to name them right away. I want to hear your answer,
Yeah.
and then I'll name the people that your writing reminds me
Uh-huh.
of. But who are your role models in writing? if you
Yeah.
will? Who have you learned from the most?
That's a great question, and I'm going to ask the same question of you. So, I think it's a hard question because over the year I'm an old guy now, and so I've been reading poetry since I was a very young man. My dad read poems to me when I was a child, and then I would have said Yeats, Frost, etc. Those are like my deep imprinted people. I love Wordsworth. I love all the modernists. I love almost everybody you could mention there. But if we're coming into more contemporary writing, I would say my first, in terms of a school of writing, which you did ask that. I mean, I think that's part of the question. What's kind of like school would I put myself in most? I would say the deep image poets, the poets of, Merwin, Bly, James Wright, those writers, but also I would also say people like the New York poets, although I don't think that comes through very clearly. Or people in the earlier generation, I would say Rutge and I almost have an easier time saying who I feel has not influenced me at all. I mean Jack Gilbert. I like Jack Gilbert a lot. Linda Gregg. It's a great question, but it requires a little bit of breathing and thinking for a minute. Or else we go like an hour later when I'm driving back to Black Mountain, I'm going to say, well, I'm sorry I forgot, because I really like you, So who did you think? I like Merwin, W.S. Merwin a lot.
All of those.
Yeah.
But the two that I found most similar, and it may just be particular works by these two actually, but Galway Kinnell.
Oh, yeah. I like him a lot.
The Book of Nightmares.
Uh-huh.
I really see that same sort of associative movement in here.
Wow.
And then kind of in the same vein, but with even deeper emotional context, Lee Young Lee, particularly
really?
in like his poem Persimmons.
His earlier stuff?
Yeah, it's when he's writing about his father primarily.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Those are gifts. Thank you for that, because they're both people I admire a great deal, particularly Lee Young's earlier work, and all of Galway Kinnell's, and the Book of Nightmares was something I read. I think when it came out, and it came out like what, 71 maybe.
Yeah, I'm not exactly the year.
Around there,
70s.
So yeah, early. But no, okay. So now, how about you? What would you say? Again, not going back to like Wordsworth and Whitman and all those guys, but let's say from post World War II, what poets would you feel have had the most impact on the actual way you write and what's in your work?
I think Galway Kinnell is a persistent model, if you will, for me. He's probably, if you ask me who my favorite poet was, I would probably say Kinnell. And in particular, the Book of Nightmares. I mean, it totally changed everything that I thought I was supposed to be doing in writing. And then Mary Oliver has had really a big impact on me. And maybe you mentioned the accessibility of my work. Maybe that's where that comes from. Is, I feel like her work was very accessible without being facile, and I really enjoyed that. So as I think about someone reading my poem, I always want to make sure that my brother, my wife, my daughter, any of my students could understand where I'm going with it and what I'm trying to get at it, or at least come pretty close to it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I see that, and that's something else to talk about. I taught for most of my teaching life at a community college with very good students. But one of the things that taught me is I did not want to write poems that they were going to go like, "What the heck are you talking about?" Whereas if I taught in let's say an MFA program, that might have been the direction that was kind of applauded, because the current fashions are lean in that direction to a certain extent. I hope I'm not going to. I don't think the word would be offend you, but I hope it's not. You don't think this wrong, but I thought a little bit of Billy Collins was in your work, but the more I read it, the less I think that. And the other thing I wanted to say about that was the reason I feel that might be. I don't know, like you might not like that connection, is because the thing I like about your work far more than I like about his work is both of your poetries are accessible about kind of daily life and things we think about in our lives, but his work is humorous with a sarcastic tone to it, and your work has humor with an embracing tone to it. So it's a very different kind of humor. And I think that was one of the things about your work that I found most strikingly fresh, is your humor is the kind of humor we can all laugh and be friends about. Like it's not looking at somebody and sort of like sneering at them a little bit, which is the current humor, I think, really, that we find in so much.
I love that you said that, and particularly how you said it, because Collins is one of those people who, and I said this to someone recently, I like Collins for like 5 or 6 poems.
Yeah.
And then I'm tired of him, and I'm done, because to me there's just too much of the sameness, poem after poem, and it becomes way too pat.
Yes,
and,
I agree.
I like something that's going to stir you up, and you've got to walk away and think about it for a while as well. And I get more of that with Mary Oliver, who I think has the same sort of accessibility.
Yeah. It's funny. Also, Billy Collins does not have the formal integrity that your poems do. But I used to teach when I was living in Miami. I used to teach, or I used to do poetry salons with older people, all of whom were professional and not professional poets. They weren't writers; they were doctors, lawyers, etc. And they always wanted Billy Collins. I mean, Billy Collins was the guy, and it was like I got tired. I had to like pretend I really liked him too, but. Like you, I get tired after 5 or 6 poems. Although those first 5 or 6 poems are good, and you're like, "Oh man, this is kind of cool." Then the 5th one is old. So let's read some more poems to each other.
Yeah. Do you have? I I feel like what you're doing in the book is such a challenge. Is there a favorite section of yours? Something that you would like to share that
It's funny. I told Patty I'm going to have a hard time reading from this book because none of it seems to have. First of all, it's difficult emotionally, but second of all, it seems like to me, unlike most books of single poems, the sections don't have a beginning, middle, and an end that feels satisfying in terms of doing a reading. So I haven't, and actually before I came here today, I thought I should go through it and find some sections I would feel good about reading. But then I thought maybe I'll just do it.
So this is your first time doing readings?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
This book, just to tell you something briefly about it, I wrote this thing in about 3 weeks. Really, I wrote it really quickly after my wife died. She died on January 13th, 2025, and I think I was done with the book by February 15th or 20th, because it was just what I did it was what I took recourse in, and that's one of the things I've been extremely grateful to poetry for, because I had a place to go in a time of tremendous grief, to put my energy into and not feel totally lost. So that's where this book comes from. The only poem that was not brand new was the very last one that the publisher of my previous book didn't lay out the way I wanted it to be laid out. So I put that in there too, and it kind of fit the book. So I can just open up and read something, unless you have a section that you would.
Well, I would love to hear, starting on page 67,
Okay.
the section that begins at the top.
Okay.
And, maybe go to the end of the two sections there.
Okay. There's no language that
Yes.
starts there? Okay. Okay. There's no language that can take me where I need to go. No body, no dream, no hallucination. I'm breathing through a hollow blade of grass. I'm falling for what seems like years through the sky, but the sky is only my mind in a dream. Let me go, I beg myself again, like a wave. Every time we breathe, our lungs fill with dust. I am searching for a different kind of person than myself, like a wind that doesn't move. It's full of what we've thought again and again without knowing. Always the same sort of cut in the fabric, the pelt. How do I grasp who I am now and make it larger, able to hold you here with me for as long as I live? Then we waded out through a slow-moving creek, sandy bottom, through the grasses and flowers whose names we didn't know. I wish I could remember what we'd said as we leaned to look into that clear water, at the translucent minnows who wanted to taste us, who darted then returned when we stood still. That's the kind of stillness I need now. ... etc. It keeps going. I could keep going with that too, but I think it goes on for. Should I keep going with it?
Yeah, please.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. I'm going to go up to the top of the page again. Sorry. Thank you. I'm going to feel much more confident about this book after our talk. I wish I could remember what we said, and as we leaned to look into that clear water at the translucent minnows who wanted to taste us, who darted then returned when we stood still. That's the kind of stillness I need now. The door has never opened. The window has vanished from the wall. The sky is now a solid thing above me, now a kind of gaping hole in the fabric of nothing. Not nothing. I want to cuddle up beside her, breathing. I want to stand in that river. The grain in the wood she sanded for a bench, or the stand she made for the ceramic vase we bought for our final anniversary. She built it from scrap wood in a single afternoon. The truth is, keep looking, take nothing for granted. Don't live in a daze of expectation. I bought a bonsai tree to care for and admire. It calls for my daily attention. Outside, the winter birds come. Downslope, the little pool sings with wood frogs. You keep walking through the rooms, standing at the edge of sight, then stepping in to disappear. I reach out to touch you. Sometimes I'm smaller than a nut, more shallow than a puddle. She was that way too, but at least she was honest about it. She loved silly TV shows. She refused to watch violence. She wanted to watch people dance and laugh, which we didn't do enough of, which is one of my regrets. She loved to swim out beyond the waves onto sandbars in the subtropic sun. She loved the heat of summer. She was happy to ride her clunky bike in the full sun without a hat, even in the desert where the snakes and lizards took shelter under rocks. She turned her face to the sun. Thank you.
So I have so many things that I want to say just about that section. And first, I mean, I feel like I have to say, Patty told me before we got started that this book had made her cry quite a bit. It did make me tear up as well. And so when you give readings from this book, you know that's going to be the effect.
I know.
So how do you deal with that when you look up from the podium and half the audience is...
Bring boxes of tissues.
Well, the thing about that is just reading just now. I did not myself get that way, and I have a book that came out this past summer called A Sharper Silence, which is the book about really basically from the time she was diagnosed until the time she died. And I've been doing a lot of readings from that, and a lot of times, even if I've read the poem 5 or 6 times, it chokes me. Not because I'm suddenly feeling sad, but because it's the vividness of the memory is strong, so strong. I don't know. I mean, maybe. Does it really affect you guys that way? And if it does, I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I nearly got into a fight with my husband over it. And
You told me that.
yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, I didn't mean to pick on him, but it's like, you'll never write anything like this. And he was smart to not answer at all. But I mean, yeah, it is going to be emotional for anyone hearing it. And you read well, Michael. So,
Well, that's another thing, though, that I'm grateful for, because I want to be, whatever the poem is, I want to be moved by it. So,
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
And back where this section started, the lines, how do I grasp who I am now and make it larger, able to hold you here with me for as long as I live? I mean, that is the intention to some degree of the book. We're back to the concept of intentional, and I'm going to stick with unmindfulness because I do think that's what you do. You begin with an intention. This is what I'm after. But in order to get there, you have to drop all of your preconceptions and just kind of let it wash over you. And you're just fantastic at that. And then you come up with these fantastic lines. The truth is, keep looking, take nothing for granted. I mean, what an imperative to give your reader. It's just fantastic. Words that I wrote down as you were reading: gentle, patient, observant, and yet at the same time, this is that consciousness and mindfulness and unmindfulness happening all at once. So it's like an oxymoron. It's a negative capability in a sense. While you're writing about this, you are also creating a semi-conscious ars poetica, and you tell us sometimes how to do it or how to try to do it. It's the sort of thing we might never be able to describe to someone else exactly how to do it, but you're giving us little hints, little breadcrumbs that we can follow and find our way through this labyrinth.
Wow, thank you. I don't have to. Let me. May I ask you to read another poem, and then we can talk about that? 'Cause
Sure, and
don't-
I'm going to bounce you back real quick though
Okay.
to the meadow, and I mentioned all of the alliteration. I mentioned the rhyming. The one thing I didn't mention, well, I said musicality, but
Yeah.
I didn't talk very specifically. But when you were naming your influences, you did go back to the Romantics.
Yes.
And there's one line in here that is a perfect amphibrach, and you just don't see that in contemporary poetry. And it's one of my favorite lines, and I'm going to exaggerate it a little so that you can hear it. To thank her, I'm sorry, I'm not doing well. To thank her for sharing this beautiful place. And I love, Shelley does it quite often, where he'll have this series of amphibrachs that ends with an I am, and it just puts such a nice period on the end of it. I was very impressed with that, because it's just not a rhythm that we see very often in poetry anymore. It's common enough in the Romantics, but not
Yes.
so much these days.
Do the Romantics influence you to your sense of yourself?
Certainly Wordsworth and Keats. I always found Byron a little too self-absorbed,
Yeah.
and Shelley a little too, I don't know, I want to say verbose. Just, maybe if we get stuck on the amphibrachs and just keep going and going and going, and after a while I'm like, can we just get to the point?
Yeah.
But Wordsworth and Keats were big
Yeah,
influences early on.
that's the same for me. I like Blake. I always want to like. I do like Blake, but
Yeah.
I don't see him as an influence at all on me or you.
His, not so much his technique, style, but definitely his thinking.
Yeah.
Talk about someone who is very comfortable with the oxymoronic nature of existence.
Yes,
You
yes,
know,
yes,
he
definitely.
put it in his titles: "The Marriage of
Definitely.
Heaven and Hell,"
Yeah.
"Songs of Innocence,"
Yeah.
"Songs of Experience."
Yeah. How do you envision a book? Okay, for this book, I've been thinking about how do you when you put the book, when you get a number of poems, the right number of poems together. When do you start to say that I think I have a book here, and as you do that, how do you organize it into something that's a book, not just a collection of poems?
Yeah. That's probably one of the things that I enjoy most about writing is when I hit like 40 pages of poetry that I think is somehow related. That's when I consciously start to think of the idea of a book. And it is one of the biggest motivators for more writing. Usually when I first have the concept of the book, by the time I'm ready to bring it to Patty, I've doubled the number of pages, because every time I look at it, I think of something else that I should have written, and so I try to write it. But yeah, I mean, it's just, for me, it's great fun to play around with the organization and try to figure out what kind of narrative arc or what kind of development you can create by juxtaposing one poem to the next, and yeah.
Yeah. Because I thought I haven't come up with an idea of the narrative arc here that I can articulate. But when I read the book, I feel it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the mark of a good book too. Because I think a poem should resist, just as a poem should resist paraphrase. The arc of a book should resist paraphrase too, but it should be evident in the quality of reading that we do as we read the book. You know. Does that make sense, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure it makes
absolutely.
sense to you.
Yeah. It goes back to what you were saying about accessibility. I do want someone, the average reader, maybe even the below average reader, to be able to paraphrase a poem. But then I want there to be so much more for the above average reader, for the
Right.
So yeah, I want it to work on multiple.
Well, that's
levels.
a great point, because I used to always say to my students, a poem should resist paraphrase. But then what I taught them was that we should have something we could, in a sense, we could understand. So you can't. I mean, I can't paraphrase lines written above Tintern Abbey. I could, but I could tell you what it's about.
Right.
You know. So yeah, I like the way you make that a lot more subtle and more true, really. Because I don't want a poem what the heck is that poem about? I have no idea. Which it happens to me. I mean, a lot of times. Well, why don't you read another poem?
Sure.
I had a lot of poems that I could request, but Would you want to read one? Do you have one that you'd like to read?
I have one that I enjoy reading.
Okay, let's hear it.
So this is, most of my poems don't come all that quickly. I'll jot down a few notes and carry it around in my head for the next 2 weeks and kind of accumulate things. This one actually came probably as quickly as any poem I've ever written. It's on page 21. It's the first poem in the book. Well, the first non-prefatory poem called Existential Knot. And, quite literally, I was walking into my house and there was a piece of string on the ground right near the front door. Didn't make any sense that it was there. I picked it up, and then as I looked at it, I realized it was tied into a knot, and it kind of took off from there, and I literally just tried to write down what I was saying inside my head, and I realized that's a poem. I did tinker with it some, but not a whole lot. Existential knot. I picked up a knot from the ground today. Not an important knot, not of significant size, not of any significance really, at least not initially. But then I realized if not for the knot, I likely would not have noticed it at all. In fact, the knot would have just been a string, not of any special size, not of any noticeable color, not anything special about it at all. But the fact that it was tied into a knot made it not exactly like every other unknotted expanse I'd seen. Of course, I thought about unknotting the knot, but ultimately decided not to, as the knottiness was exactly what made it exactly what it was and continues to be. A knot, not like any other, ensured by its knottiness not to be left unnoticed.
That's great. I love that. It's enjoyable and alert, a very alert poem, you know. So you got that quickly? You got that like almost in one?
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really nice. That's really, really good. It's an interesting poem to start the book with, too.
I do have a quick question on the
Yeah.
poem Acknowledgement, Scott.
Yes.
Where does one get the inspiration to write this?
Which page, what page was
Page
it?
17.
The prefatory poem. The fact that throughout my life I've constantly misspelled the word acknowledgement, and you actually were the
I know.
one. Yeah,
I
yeah.
consider this the poem for Patty, by the way, just so you know, because I had to tell him once, you know, acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Take that E out. If you're in England, you can leave it in, but
Yeah, that's a great one, too.
I had it misspelled on the acknowledgements page. I think the heading of the acknowledgements page was different than the first line of text, which is grateful acknowledgement to the following. It's one of those things. I hate the fact that we don't keep the E, but
But look at the form, too. Look at you know, that's another thing. You know, I never do. I mean, it's a sonnet. We never write. I've never written those kind of poems. Except to practice.
yeah,
And you pull it off.
The one thing I love about sonnets is the turn.
Yeah.
I you know, because I think it happens in, I don't want to say almost all, but so many poems that there is a turn,
Yeah.
roughly about 2/3 of the way down the poem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like when I put something in 14 lines, I'm really giving some sort of acknowledgement without the E to the turn that you find in sonnets, and you also find them, interestingly enough, I think, in haiku. There's always they refer to the cutting word. It's that word that twists the poem, the observation, just a little bit to make it do something different.
Yeah. Do you ever write prose poems?
I've written maybe 2 or 3.
There's nothing in here. There's not. I'm not. I'm just curious. I just thought about it because I thought of a haibun.
Yeah.
You know, the prose poem followed by like a haiku would be a form that I think you would excel at, just because your clarity would allow that, and then the juxtaposition would be really.
I have
really interesting.
a couple of prose poems that are essentially mimetic. You know, they're imitating some prose form, if you will. But outside of that, I enjoy line breaks so much.
Yeah.
I love manipulating line breaks,
Yeah.
so I don't really want to give that up.
Yeah.
But you know, if
yeah.
a poem comes to me as a piece of prose, I did have one in the previous book about, I can't remember the title of the poem, it's one about different definitions of place, and or some of the quote-unquote stanzas, and each stanza is really a line of its own, and some of them look more like poetry, and then others go on for line after line without any line breaks. So, and somehow that just felt right.
Yeah.
But
I'm just learning your work now through this book. So, and you have 25 books. When was your first book published? What date? And
Early
okay, the
90s.
question is, when was it published, and how do you see your work as being different when you started publishing as you compared to now?
Oh, it's progressed so much, both thematically and stylistically, and to some degree because I have wanted to resist classification.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm trying to do something different, something new with almost every book. And as you pointed out, I'm so influenced by what I read that it wouldn't take much for me to start on a new series of poems based on something that I've recently read.
So, but when were your first books?
Early 1990s, I think.
Okay.
It may have been 1990.
Okay. I've also been impressed with some of the people that you. Who is here? Let me see. Oh, Major Jackson.
Yeah.
Your work and Major Jackson's work are very different, but you you kind of write an after Major Jackson poem. I love his work. I think he's an excellent poet. But when I read him, when I read you, I don't think, Major Jackson has influenced him.
Well, he had that great poem, Why I Write Poetry. He had the title. I didn't feel like I could write a poem without giving him some sort of acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And it is similar, I think. His is much more of a performance piece, and he comes more from that background.
Yes.
But I was imitating his approach a little bit. It's just I don't have the performance quality that he does.
I do want to pop in here just for a moment to let you know, I feel like I'm a student. I'm taking notes. I'm writing down names. Of course, you both are instructors, so it makes perfect sense. I do have a question for you, if you don't mind. I reached out to the North Carolina Poetry Society, and they were very excited that you were going to be here, of course, and they're very grateful that this was the winner. If you don't mind, Sherry Thrasher, who is the adult contest director for the North Carolina Poetry Society.
Wonderful person. I really like her.
She had an interesting question. I thought it would be kind of apropos based on what we've just been chatting about. Michael, since you're clearly transitioning into a new life experience, what should our readers expect next to see in your newest collection? Are you writing something?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually have a book that it's finished. I don't know how you do this, Scott, but I have a finished book. I mean, I have a title. It's 70 pages long. But it's my first finished. You know what I mean? Like it's finished, and now I'm going to leave it a little bit, and it'll change. I'll get more poems, but it is still. It's not like this book, but it's continuing in. I would say the question is how does one live one's life now? That would be like if putting it. How do I live my life now? And what's the presence of the person I did love deeply in my life, and how do I go on, in a meaningful way, but without being sad or maudlin about it, just in a real. I mean, like the truth. What am I going to do? So I would say that's what it's about in a way. It's called a cappella so far. And I'm going to start sending it out at some point, but I don't want to do it too quickly either. I think, and this is another question we could actually talk about. You and I have both published a great deal. I mean, we published 25 books, and I have maybe 14 or so, 15 maybe. Do we have a sense sometimes that we're publishing too quickly? I have that sense about myself sometimes, that I don't give enough space, I don't give enough time. I just finish a book and then I publish it, when maybe I could have waited longer, let it ripen, if that's the appropriate word. It's not in my nature though, because one of the reasons I do publish a lot of books is at a certain point, I feel like that book is finished, and now I'm going to, just like you, now I'm going to try something different. And if it's something different, it's not going to fit in that group of poems. So let's make that the book, and then go on to the next. Be freed from that stuff. Go on to the next stuff.
Well, not only that, but once you've written something, don't you want people to read it? I mean, that's a big part of my motivation for writing so much is that I've written it,
Yeah.
and now I want it to be read, and I want to see people respond to it, hear what they have to say about it. For me, it's a conversation, and
Yeah.
I want to get the conversation going.
Yeah.
I don't,
That's a good way. I like it. I like thinking of it as a conversation. I agree.
You both probably know Joan Barasovska.
Yes, we do.
She's also
I do.
with the North Carolina Poetry Society. She had an interesting question that was for you, but it's actually appropriate for both of you. What does it mean to you both, in a broader sense, to be a poetry citizen?
That's a great. You can go first.
Thanks. I'm not sure that's a gift. Poetry citizen. I don't know. I would have to think about the meaning of the word citizen as part of a community. I'll go with that. And I do think both as the community of other poets, I write blurbs for people. I review manuscripts. I participate in that way. I set up readings for people. I do whatever I can to help anyone who's writing. I said this somewhere recently. I think everyone's life would be better if they wrote poetry. So I want to encourage everybody who has any interest at all, and even as much to the degree that I can, those who don't have any interest, to write poetry. And to me, that goes beyond the poetry community, because I think hopefully, at least I want to believe, that if more of them wrote it and read it, the world would be a better place too.
Cheaper than therapy?
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah.
I'm glad I asked you to answer, because that's exactly what I would have said. I mean, it's and you covered all the bases. I was going to say, if someone comes to me with poems that they're starting to want to write, I want to work with them and help them, and give them as much as I can. But, and then I want them to give me something back too, in terms of like trying to work on that poem or their poems. But as a community, definitely, it's a calling, and it's a community. And if we did open ourselves more to poetry and to trying and to just using language in the way that we do in poetry, I think we would be we'd gain from that. I don't want to say we'd be happier because of it, but we'd find something. We'd find things that we would not find otherwise. So I completely agree.
Well, I
Before we
do.
run out of time, can I
Yeah,
say?
because we're almost running out, and I do want to talk a little bit more about your poetry salon and also the
Yeah.
Hickory.
Yeah, I want to hear about that.
Well, I
Hickory
want
Wood
listeners to understand about Michael's book that it is, because we talked about crying, it is not all sad. It is a complex book because it is elegiac, not just about your wife, but about your relationship, and that deepens it. It is also not just about mourning, but it is also celebratory of the life that she lived and the life that the two of you had together. And so there are moments of wonderful joy as well as deep sorrow in the book. And so I didn't want this chat to misrepresent what someone might
and
experience
it's very
with the book.
important too, because as I read it, I read about a lovely couple I wish I had known.
Well, thank you. And about your work, I don't have any profound things to say about it, except that I really, really enjoyed it. And I think a reader coming to your book, anybody coming to your book, would gain a great deal from reading it in terms of just pleasure and insights that they would not have had otherwise. But your book is full of those kind of moments where you say, I didn't realize I knew that. It reminds us of things we know and things we care about and human relationships that are precious. And I found it to be a very valuable, very humane. Humane is the word for your work, I think. Just really humane and modest in the best sense of the word.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And would you mind sharing a little bit about what's going on with the City Hickory and the Poetry Salon, and specifically? You've been doing some interesting work with that.
Yeah, so the Poetry Salon is on the third Tuesday of each month at 6 o'clock at Patrick Beaver Memorial Library here in Hickory. And it is just a group of people who are interested in poetry from different perspectives. Most of them are writing a little, all of them are reading a little. We always have a prompt, and then the next week, anyone who wants to share what they wrote from the prompt can share it. And we usually have something else that we're talking about in relation to poetry. And it's kind of informal. We'll have a guest speaker, my first guest speaker, coming up in April, Tony Robles, who has a new book coming out from Red Hawk.
Soup for the Storm.
yeah.
It's coming out soon.
Yeah, so it's very exciting and no charge, no obligation. So.
Dare I mention, where are all of these books available, Richard?
They're available at Tasteful Beans
And
and also RedHawPublications.com. Took me a while to get where you're prompting me, but I got it.
Well, both. I'm glad you mentioned both, actually. That's really good to know. And we also want to make sure all of our listeners know that the City of Hickory will be having their second annual Lit Festival, and that's going to be on Saturday, April 25th from 10 until 4, chock full of very illuminating artists, poets. There's going to be music. There'll be vendors, a little bit of everything. I think Virginia Evans is probably the keynote there, talking about her new book. God, what's the name of her new book? Correspondence.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're really looking forward to Miss Evans being there. Ron Rash and friends will be there. Joseph Bethanti will be there. Scott Owens will be there. Are you going to come and hang out? Yeah, perfect. So you're going to get to see everybody there. I want to thank you both. I really feel it's as somebody who was an English major decades ago, you guys brought me back to learning and appreciating the poetry that is out there. And again, took lots of notes. I want to thank both of you, Michael Heddich with Waking Up Alone, and with Scott Owens with The Song Is Why We Sing. Please make sure you check out our website, whether it's on Facebook, our Commerce website, Instagram. We look forward to continuing getting new words out there with new authors. Anything you want to share, Richard?
No, I want to thank you both. It's been an education.
Thank you.
It is like being in a classroom to see two poets kind of analyze each other and appreciate the work. So it does help. It's great.
I think there's only one thing left for them to say.
That is true. Yes, the title of this podcast is called RedPubPod, and we've made it over the years a thing that if you can say it, will release you to the wider world.
Okay.
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod. Do I get to go?
Close enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and we look forward to our next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
RedPubPod.
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 a podcast
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
from Red Hawk Publications.
Do I get to go?
Close enough.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.